Yeah,
All right, we are live, folks. How are we? How are we doing, Luca? Thank you for doing this with John and I.
I'm doing, man. Uh, we can't go too deep into my life because it'll be a therapy session.
We,
But it's yeah, I'm doing. There's a lot going on. There's always a lot going on, but there's even more going on right now. Pretty much. That's kind of the season of life that I'm in.
I think we absolutely can and should get into it to the degree that you want to share. But to maybe just set the stage for the folks here. I John's introduced me to a lot of people over the last couple of years. I don't think anybody has had such an informationally dense way of communicating with me as as you and I know, we've talked several conversations about platforms, how coaches operate, and you have an ability to just get into the thick of it fast and add a lot of value in those conversations quickly, which always made an impression on me and made me quite grateful we were able to have those conversations. So it was quite natural that when John and I were cooking this up, you were the first person that I hit up about doing this. So just wanted to throw that out there.
I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
man.
Always love chatting it up, man. I mean, I'm kind of like what's that little thing when you wind it up and it goes. So, uh, because I love this shit. I mean, regardless of anytime we talk, there I got a lot of stuff going on. That's for sure. But I love this stuff. I do. I don't know. I saw this like Bezos thing that went a little viral, whatever, where he talks about people, trying to find work-life balance, and that's a mistake because it's work-life harmony. And if you love your work and it energizes you and it gives you purpose, you're going to usually come home and be a better husband, father, partner. If work you hate it and it de-energizes you, feel like shit, like you have no purpose, it's going to affect other areas of your life and other way around. But my point to that is that like I tend to not look forward to a cutoff point because I'm in the work, I'm in the flow, and what I do, I love doing it. Whether it's, for anybody that doesn't follow me, like my very short kind of breakdown of what I do. I've owned a gym now for 18 and a half years. I started one in Slovenia that we were the first of its kind, that still is going very, very strong. The one in Seattle, actually, in 2 weeks will be 16 years. So it'll be official 16 years. And so I've been a coach, gym owner. At heart, I'm a coach for sure. And now I do I've done a lot of other stuff. I've done business coaching for 12 years for gym owners. I have online courses to educate coaches. I have a business coaching program. I do brand stuff now. I'm that guy. But I do a lot of media. So I really, and I coach coaches. I'm like, you are your, the media channel. So YouTube's gotten pretty big at over 500,000, and IG is this amount. I got a podcast. Facebook's at 300,000. Yada yada. But the point being is like I like to educate, and that education has opened up possibilities. I've spoken for a long time now, but I speak a lot as well. But all of it stems from, it's almost like the heart. The way I kind of give the analogy, the coaching in the gym is kind of like the heart that pumps out to everything else. Because I got a one-to-many online program, but I basically share what I do with people. I'm still doing about three. I just was looking at it. I'm doing about 2,800 to 3,000 semi-privates per year. I do about 300 group sessions per year still, which obviously is I do a lot of stuff, man. I do a lot of stuff, but it's like everything is in the gym slash coaching space, and I fucking love it. So
Man, you've been on that grind for as long as I've known you and before then, right? I remember when I got to hang with you, I think it was the first time you and Jay came through on it, and we got to hang for a little bit. Next thing I was teaching at your old
yep.
Renton gym before the new one, right? And we were hanging there, got to see Jimi Hendrix's grave. I was like, what the heck's in Renton? Jimi Hendrix's grave, man. That was, I was like, went up the hills, saw that. But then also went to that Orlando event that you hosted, one of the earlier events. I know you just kicked off this huge Vigor Ground Summit recently, and it was a huge success. But
See,
I was just
listen,
telling
man.
Dom.
I completely forgot about that. I run events.
Yeah, yeah.
I run
Epic events, bro.
yeah. So yeah, that's actually you know that was Orlando was. So I met you over 10 years ago because
Hmm.
Orlando was 9 years ago because we did Vegas 10 years. So it was a 10-year anniversary of me doing big events. So the first one we did, and you remember the first two were called Changing the Game, and then after that, I went solo with them, and it was the Vigor Ground Summit. So this was the seventh one in 10 years, and one of those seven was virtual because we had to flip it during COVID. But this last one was, I mean, and coming from me, it's always like I feel like I'm biased and whatnot. But I'll speak from the presenters and the attendees. Like this was epic. We had 237 people. It was phenomenal. That's the only way I can explain it. The speakers, the attendees, my event planner and team were phenomenal. The video crew that we hired, I mean, highest level shit. We recorded the hands-on day, just everything. I mean, and it takes me 10 to 11 months, right? I signed that contract with the hotel usually 10 to 11 months ahead of time, and then I always explain to people the year that I do the summit is basically me opening up another business and working another business. Like that's literally what it is. It's a lot of work, and so that's why I usually don't do it every year. I do it every couple of years. I'm kind of in that 2 month phase now, deciding whether we do it next year or we do it 2026. And I'll see. I won't be pressured. By the way, the reason why is because I don't ever want to not make it great. I want to set the standard for the industry, and you can ask people that were there if they think that's the standard. I think they'll tell you yes. But it's so much work, that like I don't want to cut down on the quality. And what I've seen, and by the way, no judgment here, yeah, right? It's very, very hard running events, big events, right? Right now, costs go up about 15% every year, if not 20. Hard to get butts and seats, and so I speak at a lot of events year to year, like same events. They keep bringing me out, and sometimes it'll be the quality starts going down, and I get it, right? Because you're trying to make it work financially. So, the food's not as good and the venue's not as good, and and the little thing that was there is not there anymore, and blah blah blah, and it's like I never wanted it to be that, and this is just my own personal kind of approach to events. I want people to come and be like, "Fuck, that's nuts," and go like, "Wow, like it was better than the last one. I didn't know how it could be better, but man, it was better." So I'd rather do it every 2 years and have that feeling and have that, pride, my own personal pride, and like, man, like we did it. Than just do it every year to do it and to hey, if we do it every year, we can try to make more back end money and da 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 da. It's like, nah, I just rather make it a thing that people look forward to, and then when we do it, it's like now people know, like, hey, this is gonna be the shit. So
I mean,
that's
Even
what I'm
in those
going.
early events, man, like I was on Dom, some of the outcomes are crazy, right? Like the I I know for you, you want to level up. That's just who you are all the time in every way, shape, or form. And I always have admired that about you. So I know the next Vigor Ground Summit is going to be on a whole nother level, head and shoulders above this one, even though this one, from what I hear across the board, has been one of the most profound experiences anybody who attended has had in the industry. And the thing I also would say with conversations with Dom is that, you know, you go to a Luka Hocevar event, you're going to be in the mix with all the biggest movers and shakers in the industry because Luka is a super connector, and he's been building relational equity with everybody who he sees as best in class in the way that they contribute to the industry, and you're going to get exposed to all of them at once. So I would say, like, even when we were in Orlando, and that was early in this, right? It was still changing the game, like you said. Um, Man, just the value and being around, and you do a great job of facilitating for individuals within the experience too. You're like, hey, yo, you need to talk to this person over here. You're always
Hey,
that building a bridge.
this is actually, when you're bringing this up, it's crazy because I'm thinking about, I want to share stories and lessons, right? So people take stuff from it. But so I was in talking about Orlando. Sean Hyson, who's a very good friend of mine, and he helped me write a book that I have not published yet, coming out next year. Um, but me and Sean go way back, right? And I invited Sean to speak in Orlando, and then I connected Sean and Aubrey, and that's how Sean became they had a meeting in Orlando and kind of shook hands, signed the deal for Sean to become the head of content for On It. I forgot about that, because we were one time on a call with Sean. He's like, "Yeah, I still owe you for." I'm like, owe me for what? What are you talking about? And he tells me the story. I'm like, oh shit, I forgot about that. Then I was in San Diego with Andy, who we just launched, built the last coaching program with, Andy McCloy, and I was like, I hit up Liv and I was like, yo, I know like we got a busy schedule, whatever. Let's just meet for coffee. Liv Langdon, and we met for coffee, and we're talking there, and she's just like, yeah, like, remember when I was in Orlando and I was with Adam Bornstein, and Adam introduced me to you, and then you introduced me to Aubrey, and then that's how I went to On It. And I'm like, oh shit, okay. It's like, and I'm thinking back, right? Like how many things, by the way, I think that this is a great example of all the things that happen in these events. Like this past event, the people that were in the crowd were like people that have sold their companies for multiple 8 figures were attending, and when I'm introducing them to people and they're like, oh shit, like you're that guy, and so to me, that's very, very cool, and always thinking about how you can help everybody win. So it's like, I always knew what I didn't want to do, the way I got treated in certain areas or whatever, I was like, hey, how do I make this great for the speakers, right? To where they have a great experience, they connect with a lot of people, they leave with, going like, man, that was valuable, right? How do the attendees meet the speakers? Because that's one thing about the summit that's so cool, right? Like, and every time we do it, they're like, everybody's hanging around, like everybody's in the back talking, in the hallways talking. Nobody goes on stage, does their spiel, and walks off to their room and fucking back to their private jet and flies off and doesn't talk to people, type of thing, right? Everybody wants to be there. They're all people that are good humans that want to support everybody else. So they're at the back watching the other people speak and connecting with attendees. And so the question becomes, and by the way, there's a principle here on how you, like, yes, we're talking about a summit, but when you talk about your gym and you talk about the community at large, how do you do that? Because I think that is, especially over time, something that makes you, I mean, John says a super connector, right? But a person of value that creates value for others, right? Shares value with others and creates value for others and connects other people. And by the way, that in and of itself could give you a career, because I'm always looking at like coaches. That's a big part of what I do today, whether it's through my content or when I speak a lot, right? It's like trying to help business owners grow their businesses in the fitness industry, but like coaches build careers and, mentor them and like, hey, how to do this, right? And I'm like, man, like, listen, you got to become a linchpin. If anybody's heard of Seth Godin's book, Linchpin, a must read. But my point behind the linchpin is, if I'm, and I've worked for a lot of people, right? And when I worked there, because what I'm seeing today is kind of like, hey, I exist, I show up, I should get paid, and you should give me everything. It's like, what? Huh? What? Right? Like, versus become a linchpin to where if you're employed by somebody, that they'd be like, oh my God, like if this person leaves, it's like the equivalent of 5 people leaving, right? Because they're so valuable, they're a linchpin. So your role in any career, let alone in fitness, is to become a linchpin, right? So that means that you develop your skills so much that you bring so much value to wherever you're at that you're a linchpin. Now, whenever you move forward, if you do it, you start your own thing, you'll be in a good place to do that. And if you don't burn bridges and you've built those, valuable bonds, then people will actually help you rise up. Right. And like, that's the game. I mean, the game, right? But like, if you do it that way, by the way, it's much more enjoyable, right? Because there's 3 intrinsic factors to motivation of human beings. And one of them is competence. So if I get better at stuff, I'm like, I don't need external motivation, right? Like if I get better at shooting a basketball, like I enjoy playing basketball more. right? If I become better at the skill of coaching, at the skill of speaking, like I enjoy it more, so I do it more, and I'm more gusto with it, and that's also gonna make me a linchpin and elevate me, and make me more in demand, right? Just because you exist doesn't mean you're in demand. That don't mean shit. And I think that's that those are the valuable lessons that I like to share of the things I've done right or the things that I've done wrong in life, and obviously share those too. But like become a linchpin. And by the way, part of being a linchpin, I would say, you guys know Andrew Coates. Andrew Coates, does a great job of like connecting people through DMs and texts. He's like a savage at it. He'll be with somebody and be like, "Hey, you met Luka?" "No." "Oh my god, I gotta meet Luka." And he'll take the phone like, "Hey, what's up, man? Like, we're here." And I got 3 fucking DMs from an event that he's at, and 3 days, 4 days later, I'm on a podcast, right? Like, but I say that to say he does it. He doesn't expect, it's that go-giver mentality, right? He doesn't expect anything in return. Like you give and it will be returned. It's also, Cialdini's law of reciprocity. And it's like, that's really valuable. Honestly, like in some ways, certain things I was like, man, I'm obligated to this guy. I gotta do stuff. And obviously he's become a great friend, but I'm giving stories and examples of like, if you're a coach, like how do you do that in the community? That's one thing that, let's kind of zoom into the micro of Vigor Ground. And, for the longest time and still to this day, the amount of times I sit down with, local business owner, not gym owner, business owner, get a coffee, help them out. Like, oh, they got a restaurant. Great. You know what? I'll bring a group of 12 people. We'll do a meeting there. We'll do a birthday there, and they're like, oh yeah, hell yeah. Right. So now I'm supporting that. Come in like, hey, what's up, Don? Good to see you. Right. Like build those relationships, see me every day, coffee, know the owner of the coffee shop. Hey, I heard there's a co-working space upstairs. Who runs that? Dave. Great. Can I talk to Dave? Dave, hey, listen, I want to do that. Cool if I bring some other people here for a meeting. I'm getting him business. I'm investing in it, right? Like I say schmoozing, but it's like it's a bad thing, but it's not. Like it's shaking hands, kissing babies, figuring out what people are struggling with and then helping them solve that thing. Because guess what? Somebody after, hey, like, any gyms around there? Oh, dude, you got to go to Vigor Ground. You got, and they won't, like, you got to go. That's the place you got to go, right? Because it's like it's like, man, like that person helped me out. Like I'm obligated to help them out. And but you got to do it. And that's the thing, though, right? Like you can't, you got to do it without expectation. That's the key, right?
There's a couple things here I really key in on. Like we mentioned, obviously, Linchpin, Seth Godin, Go Giver, another good book, right? Phenomenal book. And it's really the core message behind doing without expectation, but understanding the law of reciprocity. If you want to go into like persuasion with Robert Cialdini and his other books that are a little deeper, Never Lose a Customer Again.
Kevin Carr special. When you're talking about your community with Vigor Ground, it just immediately in my head, I'm thinking of Kevin's framework with this for the Mike Boyle gym. Awesome. It's like, yeah.
When we're talking to coaches about becoming a linchpin, I know there's this hurdle for a lot of people. And I think I can say for myself, I had to overcome this hurdle. But once I did, it was never a hurdle again. In that, a lot of times people feel that their special sauce is unique to them and they can't necessarily break out of, their little bubble and share openly with other people in the industry. And then unfortunately that creates this membrane around them where it's impermeable. Information doesn't come in, information doesn't go out, and the relationships become stagnant because, they can't transcend that limiting belief, right? And so I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but, on that note, how do you frame that for a younger coach who is taking on this mission of becoming a linchpin? And two, I think the other part of it is really great that you've always been such a big proponent of. I remember when I came and saw your new facility in Seattle, the vision for it is exactly what you're talking about right now. It was a place for you to be of service to the whole local economy, to help small business owners, to help obviously every member that came into your gym and anybody who came to visit. Like you wanted it to be a hub for for greatness, essentially, right? Like people come in, they leave transformed, whether that's because they're physically transformed, mentally, emotionally transformed through the support of the community, or other small business owners on your street, on that downtown area, you're providing the same type of support that you just outlined, being invested in them, not as a financier or anything like that, but as an emotional investment. Like you are going to put time, energy, and effort into making sure that everybody around you is successful.
Well, a couple of thoughts about that. One, I talk about this, the tall poppy syndrome. Something went in there. The tall poppy syndrome, and that a lot of people struggle with that. If you ever seen a poppy field, you know, if a poppy sticks out, like they cut it down because they want it to be completely level and aligned. So what that syndrome talks about is like this fear of standing out, right? Because one of the things where human beings are most afraid of is being persecuted, being judged, being embarrassed, right? And the moment that I put myself out there as myself, it's like it's really challenging, and so that's why you have a lot of I'll say impersonation. I just put up a reel yesterday that was kind of like, stop impersonating other coaches. Because this is what I hear from others, like, oh, well, if I talk about the hip thrust, but Brett Contreras already talked about that. If I do this person's already done it better than me. And I'm like, no, man, like, look, if you can be you, right? Anybody trying to be you is going to be a shittier version of you, but you are also going to be a shittier version of anybody else. So you got to like really lean into who you are, right? But that means that that tall poppy syndrome gets in the way, because like, oh shit, but if I'm me with my quirks and my weirdness and whatever, like that I'm kind of self-conscious about, then I could be judged. And that is very true. Like all those things are true, but I think it's very freeing, and it's what does differentiate you. Because, there's a specific amount of people that listen to you because they like you and they like your character and the way that you say stuff. And by the way, when you said somebody that's starting off, I think, and I find it very valuable, and that's kind of how I did this, was like go on this journey with me as I'm growing and learning as a coach, and it's like you don't talk in absolutes, you're always like, you're the curious person, right? Especially in the beginning parts of your career, where it's like, hey, I just learned this thing. Let me show you this thing that I learned. Hey, I was at this seminar with, whoever, Pavel Tsatsouline. I was here with, Derek Hansen and Charlie Frank, whatever, right? Like, and here's what I learned. Let me show you what I learned. So this is how I use it based on what I learned, and it makes it a little bit easier, because you're kind of like, hey, man, I don't know everything. Matter of fact, I'm learning and applying and like trying to get better at this stuff. And one, people appreciate that much more, because, the internet is full of right now people that know everything, right? Like, it's like so many absolutes. And so I think so those two, right? Know that, by the way, you're going to get judged regardless. You're rich, you're poor, judged. You're skinny, you're fat, judged. It doesn't fucking matter. Like, you're going to get judged. So you might as well get judged for doing the shit that you want to do anyways, right? So, that's my pitch to that. Number two is take people on a journey with you, right? And by the way, there's evolution. Like, if you look at my life of the things that I've done and I'm doing, there's an evolution. There's things changing. Like, you're taking people on a journey, and while you're doing that, you're creating relational equity and value and being useful. And look, let me give you examples, because sometimes people are like, what do you mean by that? Well, I kind of talk and serve to two audiences. One is, coaches and gym owners that I'm trying to help improve their careers in business. And on the other side is like, people that are trying to get fit, and I have like a athlete for life brand now, right? Like, I'm 43, I still sprint, I jump, I train like an athlete. That's kind of what I've been talking about for a long time. And I'll help people feel better and, educate them about training. Hey, how to train like smart but hard without joint pain. And hey, here's mobility drills that help my back because I fucked it up really bad 15 years ago, right? Like everything that people watch, I want there to be value and for it to be useful, right? And, edutainment, entertainment and education, right? Like, you gel them together. So if you do that, and by the way, you don't need permission to, like, listen, I'm going to repeat this. You don't need permission to add value to people. You don't. Fucking you could create stuff today that's valuable for somebody watching it. Like, hey, here's my favorite 4 hip mobility drills to make sure my hip's not bugging me, right? Somebody that's got a hip that's bugging, they might do the drills, and it's like, holy shit, this does feel better, right? hey, listen, a lot of people that get back pain in the deadlift, like, here's the top 4 mistakes. Like, let me show you what to do instead of this. I mean, I can go on and on. It could be nutrition. It could be this. It could be that. Like, hey, that's the way I look at content. I'm like, is this valuable and useful to my audience? Am I proud of this work? Yes, great. Get it out there. And the more that you do, the more you build your self-esteem bank account. And I think that's a really good analogy for most people is that, like, if you do the thing that you said you're going to do, you put a credit in your self-esteem bank account. Mm-hmm. If you don't, it's a debit. And unfortunately, the problem with a lot of people is that they say they're going to do shit and then they don't. And you keep stacking debits and you become bankrupt in self-esteem, right? So your confidence is bankrupt. And then, yeah, of course you don't do shit, right? So, by the way, how to change that is to, give yourself smaller promises and do them, right? Because this is the analogy of the person that, January comes and it's like, I know I've failed 6 times, but now I'm going to fucking work out 7 days a week, and go on this like really hardcore diet. And like, now I will do it. And I'm like, well, if you couldn't do it previously, maybe start with less, right? But if you start with less and do it, you start building up that self-esteem bank account again, and you get to a point, by the way, like I've built my self-esteem bank account enough in specific areas of my life, like coaching, that if John was like, hey, Luka, you're a fucking horrible coach. Like, you suck. It doesn't faze me. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't faze me because I have enough credit. I have a lot of credits in my self-esteem bank account about that, right? Like, so you can't tell. And so that's how I always, on a fitness side or even a business side, I'm like, hey, like, let's start having smaller wins, but like, let's stack these fuckers, right? Like, let's stack wins, let's stack wins. And so you yourself as an individual have to stack wins, and then you'll be able to do more of that and like overcome the tall poppy syndrome, right? So I think that's a really, really important factor to it. And like Hormozy has this saying, I really do like this part where it's like, outwork your self-doubt, where if I have proof, proof could be, hey, I had 4 clients, now I had 8, 9 clients, and those people are staying and they're getting results. Man, proof. Hey, I've been posting once a day valuable content to people, and I got 100 new followers this month, and people seem to be liking. Okay, cool, proof. Like, I'm proving to myself that I can do this shit, and I'm proving to myself that I'm getting results. But nothing comes without the work, you know what I mean? So there's no, if you're looking for the course online that gives you some trick gadgetry where you press one fucking button and like, your whole like life and career turns around, like, hey, you're gonna have, it's gonna be a tough life for you. You know what I mean? Like, but I really do think that's the principle of everything, because there's things that I move into now, that I haven't maybe done as much of, and I'm like, damn, like, oh, can I do this? Like, do I have any place, talking about this stuff? And then guess what? Like, I dive deeper. I'm curious. I study. I do the work. I try to get results for people. I try to get results for myself. And the more that I do that, I'm like, you know what? Fuck yeah. I think I got this. And I do more and more and more and more, and all of a sudden it's like, hey man, I own this shit. And getting into commercial real estate, buying my building was one of those things. I knew nothing about this stuff, right? Guess what? I found 4 people that I knew are really phenomenal at it, that I personally knew my network. I started spending time with them. One person was like, hey, like, I'll guide you through this. I went to, when we did this project, I went to 117 meetings in a year, and everybody's like, why are you at everything, man? I'm like, well, number one, because I don't want you to fuck me up on, when I'm looking at what costs what, and I'm running it by my other friend that like does this. And she's like, yeah, that's a little too expensive. Like, let's look at this together. I was learning. Like, I was at everything, right? And it built my confidence up. And I had people, I have a big principle in life, collect role models, right? Collected a role model in that area. And they've done this before on a high level a lot of times, right? And they guided me through it. Now, like, as I'm at more meetings, as I'm at more stuff, now like my self-esteem and my understanding of all these things go up, and I wouldn't call myself like a commercial real estate like guru, but I tell you what, I know quite a bit of shit about that, because, I bought a building like almost 8 years ago. It's pretty much fully occupied with tenants. Like, we're in it. I ate some shit on certain things, and I learned about that, and it's like, man, now I'm consulting other gym owners that I want to go into that space, meaning like possibly buying their own spot. And I have a lot of knowledge around it. And I own an apartment building in upstate New York. I own this building. So hey, like that's how this works, right? But don't forget that I said 117 meetings in a year, because that's the thing that people want to skip, right? It's like, oh, is there a manual I can read and just skip the 117 meetings? Maybe I overkilled it. Maybe I could have just gone to 60, but that's just me. I'm an obsessive weird fucker.
Let's talk about that. Let me talk. I got a question for you.
Yeah,
So,
I know this is a perfect lead in for Dom.
yeah, I know. I was like, we got to talk about this. We're talking to Luka. Like, you're listening. Anybody listening to this, there's a theme that they're going to pick up on immediately, and that's the work. And it also scares the shit out of people because it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work. And you've achieved an outsized level of success. But again, you listen to this and you realize, well, you're doing an outsized amount of work. And it seems like you have a superhuman work ethic. And it makes me want to ask, what drives that? And also, do you think that having a work ethic like that is non-negotiable for an outsized level of success like you've seen?
That's just the price of admission at the beginning. That's the first door. That's the first door of admission. Look, I think a lot of people will confirm that, like, you could work really hard and not get to places in life. And I'll give an analogy that, I don't know, it may not be the best one, but I hope it carries over, right? Like, you could work a 12-hour shift in a factory and not get far in life, right? Like, so obviously, like, working hard matters a ton, but how you work hard and what you work towards, and, obviously, like, having a vision and a target. I call it having a vision that pulls you, right? A compelling vision that pulls you. I think that's really important. Even now, I've sometimes achieved things in life and kind of been a little bit in that floating space where I'm, okay, we're here now, and you kind of coast for a little bit, and sometimes because you're coasting, you kind of, the law of the slight edge, you start falling off a little bit, right? And you need that compelling vision to pull you that you throw yourself into. So work ethic, by the way, like, look, if you want to be great, you got to have it. And it really comes down to, I think, like, I'll give another story. I don't necessarily agree with all the things that Scott Galloway says, but he has some pretty smart things to say, and he's been pretty successful in his life. So this one I do. He did an interview with he has this company. He's like, all these young people to start working there, and he did a survey, and was like, how much money do you want to make? And they're like, the average is like $650,000, right? But they're also like, hey, but I don't really want to work more than 40 hours. Matter of fact, if I could work 30, this, that, the other. And, he's mentoring these people, and he's like, hold on. Like, and he asks, like, do you know what 650 puts you in and what percentage of Americans it puts you in? Like, 20? No, like, it puts you in less than 1%, right? If you look it up right now. I think 400 is 1%. Like, but basically 600, you're 0.5% or something like that. Don't quote me on it. So what are those 0.5% of people doing? Do you think those 0.5% of people are working 30 hours a week? No. At the beginning of their career, maybe not later on, right? But at the beginning of their career, the first 10 years, at least 5, but probably 10 plus, they're working 60, 80, 100. Now, listen, I'm not saying you should do that, by the way. What I'm saying is these expectations, right? Like, what's difficult is scarce, and what's scarce is valuable. If everybody can do it, it becomes a commodity. It becomes not as valuable, right? Yeah, everybody wants to work 30 hours and make 650, like, right? But there's so few that do it. So to me, the work ethic, it's not the only thing, but it's certainly like a very important thing, and it's it is the price of admission even to to anything greatness. And like, basketball is a big part of my life. It's what brought me to the U.S. I went to college on a ball scholarship. I played pro overseas for 3 years. At the end of it, was a broke athlete, just so you know. I started my coaching gym career broke. But it was an incredible experience for me. But it's the same thing. Like, I was a workhorse. I shouldn't have made it to how far I made it in basketball. And it's like, do you think that if somebody comes in and talks to Kobe, may he rest in peace, and says, "Hey, Kobe, I want to achieve a level of greatness you've achieved," And so I'm scheduling 3 days a week at the YMCA for an hour and a half. Be like, dude, you won't even be the best player at the YMCA, right? Like you have to be. There's 400 NBA players in the world, 9 billion people. Like, dude, obviously, look, height, genetics. There's a lot of shit. But my point being is like, if you make it long in NBA, like, dude, you gotta work your face off. And like I squeezed all the juice out of the orange. The furthest I made it was played for some pretty high level teams in Europe. And NBA Summer Pro League, I made it through. Made it to two of the select teams, basically out of 520 players. I made it to 24 to play the NBA Summer Pro League in Southern California, right? And I never had like this illustrious career or anything like that. But man, I squeezed all the juice out of the orange. And there has to be this understanding, and I think one of the best things that we can do for people is to show them what it takes. You can then choose if you want to do that, but anything that's worth it takes a lot of work, right? And then it's like because I think that's the foundation is like having that work ethic, and then the second part is being curious, being curious to find the people that have done it before you, investing in yourself, like the S&P and me. This is what I see today, where less and less people are investing in their own knowledge, whether it's through mentoring, through coaching, through books, through courses, seminars. I mean, I spent the first 10 years of my life, in this career, that's all I spend money on, nothing else. Everything was investing in me to become better at coaching, better gym owner, everything, right? So if you look at, you Inc. is on a stock market and stock index, and somebody had to invest in you, like, would you be a good stock to invest in? By the way, I knew I was because I was investing so much time and money and energy into becoming better at my craft that I was outworking my self-doubt, because I would talk to other people. I'm like, holy shit, like in the first 5 years I spent $100,000, and then in the next 5 years I spent like $250,000, and then it just kept going up. I was just investing so much in myself, into education and time, like, because back then you had to fly to events for everything, right? John don't know, like I've been to, I would actually I think this is not even opinionated, but I've probably in the last 20 years been to more events physically, I think, than maybe any other person. I'm inching into 300, and a lot of those too. In the last 10 years I've been speaking, but nonetheless, like I was just so thirsty, and I wanted to get around people that have done it, right? I wanted to be like, who's the person that's the best in the sports performance field? Who's the best speed guy? Who's the best facility owner? And like I would go there and I'd invest and I'd learn and I'd shut the fuck up and listen, and go back and implement those things, right? So I was collecting role models and hunting for skill sets, right? Collect role models, hunt for skill sets. So yes, work ethic, but then you got to stack all these other things on top of it, because sometimes work ethic can become your enemy, which I'll be honest with you, that it's happened in my life, right? Because that was my superpower. It's like, I'll outwork you. You can't outwork me. There's just no way. Like you
But if you're working in the wrong direction,
that's what I was going to say.
It can get you somewhere where you
we
want to
see
be.
this at Sambo. It's like you need the vision that pulls you, to use your words,
Correct.
to kind of align things. Because if you don't have that, you're going to be stacking hours. You're going to be somewhat proud of yourself for all that work you're putting in. But if you're just moving sideways, it's pointless. And there's that grind set mentality in fitness that I think people will jump to. But it's like it's got to be tight and it's got to be in the right direction, or you're not going anywhere at all. And it can be an excuse and a crutch.
Absolutely, but it's also this. Like, think about it. Like, I would just, as a business owner, I'd be like, I'll do it myself, right? But it's like, look, if I'm doing 10 hours of admin per week, somebody can do that way better than me, number one. Number two, like, I'll make more money coaching than paying them to do admin, right? Or, I'm finding myself, because I have 4 businesses now, right? So I'm finding myself in each business, getting clarity around that, like, oh man, I'm working too hard at this thing where I can make it easier on myself, right? Because somebody else can do it better. A technology can do it better. This person's more fired up to do this thing. This is not my genius. And like, let me work my ass off in my genius, right? And like, I know today, I know what that is for me, right? So as you're growing up and you're developing yourself in a career, you're kind of, you're finding yourself through work. But I would say, my argument would be become phenomenal at the craft. Like your craft is coaching. So I think people skip that now. Like let me quickly get to like online and do this, but and I'm just like, dude, become phenomenal at your craft. You
Well,
will
you said it
stand out.
yourself, like everything else is a function of the reps you got in your gym, the reps you got face to face, the systems you developed to serve the people, the very people that came through the door. You develop systems to create consistently positive outcomes with all the different people that walk through your door at Vigor Ground. And then you distill that into something that can be evergreen, can be digitized, can
Correct.
be
Like
systematized to other coaches, right?
you share the
And
shit that you do. Like it's funny. I was FaceTime with Ben Bruno a couple of days ago, and we're always talking about stuff and whatnot. But it's just like, how do you I would say create the content. I do 3,000 semis still a year and 300 sessions, and I'm coaching. Like I'm living this shit all the time. Like I don't, I can make content all the time about the stuff that I do. It's hard to make it when you're just making shit up all the time, right? Like that's my thing. Like, look, it sounds so, it's simple but hard, but it's like if you really do the thing, okay? Like there's so much stuff to talk about. There's so much things to see. There's, you know what I mean? Like conversations with your clients every day, shit that you see, comparisons, this, that, the other, because you're living it, right? And by the way, it's much more difficult to be an imposter if you live it, like if you do the stuff, right? So, and by the way, like in the next 10, like I think that AI is gonna, what's gonna become easier to do is like, look, I just created my new course. There's a Luka bot in there, right? The Luka bot is writing programs like me, small group. Like we're training it to in 45 seconds it writes your 4-week program. So that stuff is like, gonna get easier and easier. But coaching will never be replaced, man. Like if you're a great coach, because a great coach is a lot of things. You're a great communicator, storyteller. You get people to buy in. You know how to speak to people, when to speak. And yeah, you obviously you're a very good problem solver, right? You're good at programming, but the thing is you're able to adjust programming as necessary because you coach what you see, right? And it's like that, man, like that's not going away, right? Like, and so again, if you in this space, think about those skill sets that you need, to become a great coach,
well,
right?
you're saying it yourself. The technical aspect, like even overview, adjustments, scaling options, things like that, can be output by well-designed AI bots to some degree, right?
Yeah, and it's,
But it
it's
doesn't mean that you won't be adapting it on the fly and making tons of adjustments, changing your communication style. So this is something that I really wanted to make sure we hit on in this call is what are so we could say there's so many different forms of technical fitness education. And whatever you choose, whatever aligns best with your mission, vision, value, what interests you and you're passionate in delivering that type of content around, you could be really successful. But things that you and I have talked about so many times don't centrate just around that. Like what are the frameworks for successful coaches, high impact coaches, communication, uh, psychology. These are things that I know you geek out on. And so like the soft skills approaches, where have you found the most value in those areas for
I mean,
coaches?
here's the thing. I went on a journey about this, right? Like, and I'll tell a little bit of a story because I was so. I mean, I still am. I'm a geek when it comes to training. Right? So I was studying like the old Russian, Zetsursky, Verkhoshansky, Tudor Bompa stuff when I was 15. I was reading Charlie Francis's speed trap when I was 16. I was training when I was 17 in Slovenia. I trained with this guy, Srđan Đorđević, hard name to say, but he was the top track coach. He was training Marilyn Adi and Brigitta Bukovic, like Olympic medalists, right? I was training with him in the mornings before school. So I've always been a geek about that. And it took, like, I was really good at training stuff. And it was like, hey, some people were getting phenomenal results, but some people were not getting results. And I was the person that was blaming those people. They're not committed. I know my shit. They're not committed. And it took for me to go through, a divorce and a big like fuck ups in my own personal life, where you end up going like, hey, why did I do that stupid shit? And I went into therapy and, joined Wake Up Warrior and like, went through my own personal and thing. That was one of the hardest things in the world to do for me, by the way. I grew up in Yugoslavia, like in socialism. People are not really great at asking for help. Men are not great at asking for help. But I was at a very low, personally in my soul, and like I needed help, and I got help. In that process, the reason I tell this story is because it made me start understanding clients. Why? Because I had my shit figured out in fitness and nutrition, but I obviously didn't have my shit figured out in other areas of my life, right? And it started making me go like, oh, like I'm struggling with these things, they're struggling with that. So, and it's like, by the way, that's when I started going 10x on like reading psychology books, behavior change. I did, Dark Side of Light Chasers, Why Good People Do Bad Things. I became a shadow coach through Debbie Ford, Byron Katie's stuff, Crucial Conversations, motivational interviewing. Dude, you name it, I've done it. Not just the book, but the courses. And it really, like, that kind of just opened my eyes into, it's not, the X's and O's are one thing, but how do we get the people to do the X's and O's at their own pace, based on their own life and their own struggles and insecurities and traumas. And that made me so much of a better coach, right? Because the conversations I started having, the questions I started asking, the things I started sharing that made me connect to the client, that made them go like, oh man, like he understands this, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, the thing that was hard for them to do, they start doing it. And I realized, like, there's so much, there's I think me and Brett Bartholomew were talking about, there's three aspects to coaching, right? Like the definition, it's technical abilities, problem solving, and communication. The technical stuff is like Perlepin charts, and I mean, we go all of that, right? Like movement patterns, all important things, by the way. Where are your insertion points? Like everything around that, like vectors of force production, yada, yada, right? Like, by the way, very important. Okay. And then communication. Now, I think some of the stuff that I just talked about of psychology, behavior change, environmental science, all that, like, I think that falls under communication and under problem solving, right? Because problem solving, like those two kind of gel together, right? Like where you're like, man, I'm telling them all the right stuff to do, but they're not doing it. Now you got to solve the problem, right? You got to be a detective. You got to find different ways to present it to them, different analogies. You got to sometimes trick the client, like, it's like putting the pill into, or putting the veggies into the smoothie for your kid, or putting the pill into the dessert, whatever you want to call it, right? Like, but the thing is, the better you understand human psychology, neurology, change psychology, right? Behavior change, all those, like the actual principles of it, the better you are at coaching. And so for me, like my own, I would say, shortcomings and trauma from the past that I brought into the future and kind of fucked things up in my life, thankfully, I was courageous enough to go, hey man, I need help. Like I really need help. Like I don't know what the hell to do. Like I'm successful, but I just did a bunch of stupid shit and burnt a whole bunch of my life down. That part actually helped me become a better coach, which, the ding, 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 kind of aha moment here, by the way, for anybody is like, become a better human, become a better coach. Corny as it may sound, I'm telling you, like it really is a thing, which means that personal development, whatever that means for you, I think some people are like, oh, that means that you go walk on fire with Tony Robbins. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's therapy. Maybe it's MDMA therapy. Like maybe it's a lot of different things that can help you kind of overcome your own glass ceilings, right? Which, if you want another great book by Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap. I got 100 books for you if you want. But
maybe
the point here is that like, that you are, people say this thing like, I found myself. I don't know, man. I'm always searching, right? Like I'm always searching to be better, to improve, and as you do that, by the way, your clients will know it. Like your clients know when you're studying books and when you're going to courses and seminars and coming back with more knowledge, and dude, you can't, like, for instance, I've been doing this for 20 years. You can't tell me that like right now I'm faking this shit. You can't. Like I like, you come to Vigor, I'm not there like, oh, I've been doing this for 20 years. Fuck, like I just had to put out a fire. Like when I'm coaching, I'm like, I'm on, man. Like that's where I want to be. I'm in flow, right? So when by the way, things that I don't know shit about, I love watching cooking shows. Me and my girl were just watching Chef's Table. Dude, I will cry when I watch Chef's Table. Yes, I fucking said it. Because it's like stories of those people love making food so much that it makes me emotional. You can see it, dude. You're like this lady, who's the lady that's she's like 70 now. She has like, 3 restaurants. She used to be in Spago with I'm gonna blank. It'll come to me. But like she's like, people ask me, like, she's got plenty of money. She's like, people ask me when I'm gonna stop cooking. It's like, what? Never. She's in a restaurant. Like, she loves it. Like, she loves this shit, right? And like,
So when are you going to stop coaching?
dude, it's not happening. I don't know. Like,
Nah.
I don't, I can't. Will it change? I mean, I'm coaching 20 hours a week right now. NFL offseason, that goes up. Like, hey, me and my girl, like, we're working on a family. That's probably gonna go down, but I'm not gonna stop coaching. And by the way, I'm coaching on floor. I'm coaching teams. I'm coaching individuals. I'm coaching groups. I'm coaching business. So I'm a coach. And
That's who you are.
and it's like, but by the thing, why would you stop doing the things you love doing? Actually, who was another person I met through On It was Jeremy Hills. I just had Jeremy speak at the event. Like, we can, same thing. I think I met him close to, I think it was at the grand opening of On It was the first time I met him, if I'm not mistaken. Because he took over DeFranco's, when DeFranco kind of left On It, and he took over the sports performance part of it. But we're doing like a kind of fireside chat, and it's like, he said, like, man, I don't want to stop working. I want to do work that works on me, that like I'll enjoy like, you know what I mean? It's the same thing. Like, why would you stop doing the thing that you love doing? And I would argue, give any of us whatever amount of money that you think is, plenty to like not ever have to do work again. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to do shit that I want to do. Like, so you won't be happy just not doing work, right? Work is fulfilling. Work is meaningful. I mean, that's the work that you should be doing, which, by the way, like, I'll leave at least with one book. I say that I probably call this book out, and it's not about the book. It's about the message. It's about the substance that you get from it and what it talks about. Is Cal Newport is So Good They Can't Ignore You. Every coach should read that book, like, now. If you've read it, just read it again. Because it talks about the passion hypotheses, right? Like, this idea that you start doing something and you're like, oh my God, like, I'm so passionate about this. I'm going to do this to the end of my days, right? It just hits you. And it's not like, and actually studies show this, right? Like, through deliberate practice, right? Deliberate practice means focused practice, not bullshit practice. It means like very focused practice, getting better at a skill. Through deliberate practice, you build what's called career capital, right? So as a coach, you should have a lot of deliberate practice, learn and study, and then apply it, and you'll build that skill set, and you'll build career capital. And the better you get, the more passionate you become about it, right? And this is not my opinion. This is a lot of studied stuff, right? I can tell you that basketball for me, the story of basketball. Oh man, did you fall in love with basketball? Dude, I was the short kid. I got picked on. I never got fucking picked. Like, I was pissed off. I was like, man, fuck all you people. Like, so I would just go and train my ass off with a chip on my shoulder. Because, Dom, you said earlier, a lot of my life up until that point that I got therapy was like a chip on my shoulder. And it was helpful sometimes, a lot of the times in the early era of my life. And then it sometimes became unhelpful, right? Because everything became a chip on my shoulder, right? So, but by the way, the chip on my shoulder made me work really hard. It made me do deliberate practice and build career capital. And the better I got at basketball, my competence, the more I loved it, the more you know what I mean? Like, so this is my sell to you. That is like, give something. You know how many people I've seen that like do something for 2-3 months, whatever, and like, oh, it's not for me. I'm like, first of all, it's a very short amount of time. Second of all, you're giving it a half-ass effort. So you'll never know. At that effort level, you'll actually never be passionate about anything. Fucking give it everything. Give it everything for a year. Everything you got. And then if after a year, like, you're like, maybe this is not for me. Guess what? You'll still got to build a lot of skills. You'll still put in a lot of work. You'll actually build resilience and a good work, because work ethic is a habit too, right? Like, if you work 5 out of 10 or 4 out of 10 on an intensity level at things, and you do that for a long time, guess what? Now you're a 4 out. Just because you're going to work on something you want, you're not going to be a 10 out of 10. You've practiced being a 4 out of 10 person. So that's your level. If I worked at a 10 out of 10 at everything, even the shit that I didn't necessarily like and eventually was like, this is not for me. I just know, like, you can wake me up in the middle of the night, I'm a 10 out of 10 guy. So that's enough reason for when, like, I worked jobs and positions that I'm like, man, I don't know if this is for me. But you know what? I'm going to bust my ass because I want to be successful at this thing, right? And whenever I moved on, I practiced hard work. Again, that's a skill set in of itself. I see a lot of people that are like, man, you're living your life at a 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10. Imagine if you're a 10. Dude, do it for a year. Do some shit for a year. Everything you got, all in, like literally everything you got. And then at the end of the year, tell me how you feel and where you're
How you
at.
do anything is how you do everything.
I hate to cut it because this is solid gold. But I got a demo that started 2 minutes ago, so I got to call this thing. maybe we got a part 2 of this at some point because
We'll do a
it's
part
just
2.
super useful. Luka, thank you so much as always for sharing this sort of stuff. Thank you for doing this with us. It means the world. Genuinely appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you guys listening to my ramblings.
No,
It's
man,
it's
this
good
is
stuff.
always fire. It's
Hopefully
always
they're
gold.
valuable and useful ramblings. So
It's good stuff. It's good stuff. All right, guys.
Appreciate you guys,
I will. We'll talk to you. Thank you, man.
all right. Peace out.
Thanks, Luka.